true crime case that never made the headlines. Murder of Kate Bushell. The sun had just begun to fade over the quiet suburb of Exwick in Exeter. It was November 15, 1997, the kind of evening where everything felt ordinary. Children were still out on their bikes, dogs barked in the distance, and the orange glow of streetlights flickered to life one by one. 14-year-old Kate Bushell walked along Exwick Lane, her small figure framed against the dusky horizon. She was leading the family dog, Gemma, along a narrow footpath that wound between open fields and hedgerows, a place locals called peaceful, but where the wrong kind of silence could quickly turn sinister. Kate was well-liked, polite, dependable, bright. She loved animals, helped at local stables, and had a close-knit group of friends. Her walk that evening was nothing unusual, just a quick outing before dinner. But by the time her father looked out the window, scanning the dimming light for his daughter's return, she was already gone. At 7:30 p.m., her father grew uneasy. The dog hadn't returned either. He set out to find her, flashlight in hand, walking the familiar route up the lane. He called her name into the dark, once, twice, 3 times, until the beam of his torch caught something pale against the grass. Gemma, the dog, was there, trembling and whimpering. And a few meters away, the beam fell upon something else. A flash of blue, a shoe, a piece of fabric, and then stillness. Kate was lying face down in the grass, her throat cut, the earth beneath her soaked dark. The lane was quiet, as if holding its breath. Her father dropped to his knees, calling her name in disbelief, the sound echoing through the countryside as neighbors emerged from their homes to see what had happened. Within the hour, the small lane was flooded with flashing blue lights. Police cordoned off the area, searching for footprints, fibers, anything that could make sense of what had just happened in one of the safest neighborhoods in Devon. But nothing did. Detective Superintendent Paul James arrived at the scene before midnight. This wasn't random, he told the team quietly. Someone was waiting. The crime scene offered almost no clarity. There was no sign of struggle, no weapon, and no witnesses, only the eerie detail that Kate's dog had been found unharmed beside her body, as if guarding her. By morning, the story had already gripped the local news. Schoolgirl murdered near her home, the headlines read. But beyond the shock, the facts were painfully scarce. Police knocked on hundreds of doors, interviewing neighbors, friends, teachers, anyone who might have seen something. A man in a blue car had reportedly been seen parked near the lane earlier that evening. Another witness mentioned a figure walking quickly toward the city center, head down, wearing a dark coat. None of it added up. When forensic teams combed through the grass, they found a single orange fiber near Kate's clothing, possibly from a jumper. The clue was small, almost insignificant, but it became the foundation for the entire case. Investigators released a public appeal. We are looking for a man wearing an orange or rust-colored sweater, last seen near Exwick Lane between 4:30 and 6 p.m. Tips flooded in over 2,000 leads within days. But none of them pointed to anyone real. Each call seemed to fade into dead ends. At school, classmates described Kate as cautious and kind. She wasn't the type to talk to strangers. Teachers said she was happy, focused, with no signs of trouble at home. The lack of motive gnawed at the detectives. It wasn't robbery, her jewelry and watch were untouched. It wasn't random violence, either. The method of attack suggested precision, purpose. By the end of the first week, officers admitted what no one wanted to hear: there was no suspect. The community was terrified. Parents stopped letting their children walk home alone. Street patrols doubled. The once peaceful lanes of Exwick now carried the weight of suspicion. Every passerby, every unfamiliar face, was a potential killer. Detectives widened their scope. They re-examined similar crimes in nearby counties, hunting for patterns. But the only thing that kept coming back was that orange fiber, a thread connecting nothing to no one. One officer described the case as chasing smoke in the fog. Then, weeks later, a farmer came forward. He said he'd seen something odd that day: a man walking near the field before sunset, alone, hands deep in his pockets. When police asked if he could describe him, the farmer hesitated. "Not really. I remember the color though. That sweater. Orange." The detail reignited the case. Police plastered posters across the country. They called it the hunt for the man in orange. But as months turned into years, the man remained a shadow, a figure glimpsed but never found. And then came the most unsettling twist of all. A woman reported that she had been approached by a man near the same lane, just one day before Kate's murder. He had asked about local footpaths. He'd been polite, calm, but something about his voice chilled her. When investigators showed her the police sketch of the man in orange, she froze. "That's him," she whispered, but the lead would vanish, no matching identity, no vehicle, no trace. And as Christmas approached in 1997, the case that had once consumed the nation began to fade from headlines, replaced by newer tragedies. The police file grew thicker, but the trail grew colder. Still, for those closest to Kate, one question lingered like a ghost in the fog. Who could kill a child so close to home and disappear as if they'd never existed? Because when detectives reopened the file 2 years later, they discovered something that made them question everything they thought they knew about that night. And what they found wasn't just evidence. It was a message. The years passed, but in Exeter, the memory of Kate Bushell's murder refused to fade. Locals avoided the footpath near Exeter Lane long after the police tape came down. Some said the air still felt different there, colder, heavier. But for the detectives who refused to let the case die, that lane wasn't haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by unanswered questions. In 1999, 2 years after the murder, Devon and Cornwall police reassembled a new task force to review every detail of the investigation. Over 20,000 witness statements, photographs, and fibers were re-examined. New detectives brought in fresh eyes, and the first thing they noticed was how one detail, a single orange fiber, had consumed the original case. It wasn't just any fiber. It came from a rare, textured wool used in limited clothing lines in the late 90s. Forensic experts traced it to a small manufacturer in Yorkshire, one that supplied only a handful of UK retailers. But by then, the trail had gone cold. The manufacturer had closed. The inventory had long been scrapped. The man in orange had vanished into history. And yet, a year later, a letter arrived at the Exeter police station. It wasn't signed. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, the ink slightly smudged, as if written by someone who wanted to be careful but not caught. "You're looking for the wrong man. She wasn't supposed to die." There was no return address, no fingerprints, no traceable DNA. The letter was analyzed, copied, and sealed in evidence. But its words gnawed at the investigators. She wasn't supposed to die. Detective Superintendent Paul James, who had led the first inquiry, described that moment years later. It was the first time the case stopped feeling like an accident and started feeling like a cover-up. The detectives revisited the witness reports. A jogger had mentioned seeing a man standing by the hedgerow near Exeter Lane, just minutes before sunset on the day of the murder. He wasn't moving, just watching. The description matched the farmer's account. Mid-30s, short hair, wearing an orange jumper. But what really drew the investigators' attention wasn't the jumper. It was the location. The man was standing by a gap in the hedge, a perfect view of the lane where Kate would later walk. A blind spot. Whoever he was, he had chosen that spot deliberately. When police canvassed the nearby neighborhoods again, an elderly woman came forward with something chilling. She said she remembered a man knocking on her door 2 days before the murder. He claimed to be looking for his lost cat, a ginger one, he said, and asked if he could check her garden. She refused, but his politeness unnerved her. When detectives showed her a police sketch based on previous witness descriptions, she nodded slowly. "That's him. Same man. Same color sweater." Still, there was nothing. No CCTV, no fingerprints, no vehicle registration. The man in orange remained nothing more than a ghost stitched together from frightened memories. Then, in 2001, a new forensic technology promised hope. Low copy number DNA analysis, capable of detecting trace amounts invisible in the 1990s. Investigators reopened Kate's clothing samples, searching for anything: skin cells, sweat, hair. The results came back weeks later, but the partial DNA profile didn't match anyone in the national database. It was progress without closure. Science had drawn the outline of a man, but not his name. As the 2000s unfolded, Kate's story slipped quietly from public consciousness. But inside the Exeter cold case unit, the board bearing her photo never came down. Detectives marked anniversaries with press appeals, hoping someone, anyone, might remember something new. And then, in 2017, 20 years after the murder, the story resurfaced with a vengeance. A television program revisiting Britain's coldest cases aired an episode on Kate Bushell. It sparked a surge of public interest, and one particular call stood out. The caller was a retired delivery driver who claimed he had seen something strange the day of the murder: a rust-colored Ford Escort parked awkwardly along the lane. Inside, he'd noticed a man sitting motionless, hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. But what froze him wasn't the car. It was what he remembered years later, watching the news coverage. The man in the car had been wearing orange. Detectives tracked the car's registration records, hoping to match it to any known offenders from the time. The vehicle was never found. The records had been destroyed years earlier. Another lead, gone. Still, the revived attention brought new witnesses. One woman, who had been a teenager back then, claimed she saw a man near Exeter Lane weeks before the murder, watching the path from across the field. She thought he might have been sketching, but now she wasn't sure. It looked like he was waiting, she said. It was then that the case took a darker turn. Detectives began comparing Kate's murder to similar cases across the UK: young girls, rural settings, knife attacks, no motive. A few shared details were eerie: no sexual assault, personal items left behind, deliberate precision. One in particular, the 1988 murder of Lynn Bryant in Cornwall, seemed almost identical. Two murders, nearly a decade apart. Two girls killed on lonely lanes. Both found within sight of home. Both unsolved. Investigators contacted Cornwall police to exchange evidence. And when the forensic teams compared fibers and tool marks, the results sent a chill through the room. Both cases contained fibers from an orange textile. For the first time in 20 years, detectives believed they were dealing with the same killer. But if that were true, it meant something terrifying. The man in orange hadn't struck once. He had come back. The combined task force began tracing suspects who had lived or worked in both regions. A few names emerged: delivery drivers, contractors, transient workers. But one stood out. He had lived just 10 miles from Exeter in 1997 and 6 miles from Cornwall in 1988. And when detectives visited his last known address, they found something waiting for them, something that made the room go silent. A neatly folded sweater. Orange. And inside the pocket was a single, crumpled note. "You stopped looking. I never stopped watching."